for an equal period of time, 3 minutes, 3 hours, 10 minutes. And I recognize the Honourable Member for St. Christopher 6, the Right Honourable Dr. Denzel Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I rise to make my contribution on the budget that is the Appropriation 2021 Bill 2020. And I do so, Mr. Speaker, against the backdrop, as you yourself have announced, that I would take, or I have, I should say, because I don't want to frighten anyone, that I have as long as 3 hours, 10 minutes to respond to the budget as was presented yesterday in this, our Parliament, the National Assembly of our Parliament, by the Honourable Prime Minister and our Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, I think we are all of the view that COVID-19 is one of the most devastating crises that the entire globe, including our Federation, has faced in recent times. Hence, it was my expectation that this year's budget would have presented a realistic picture of the problems that we face as a result of this global pandemic, and would have proposed solutions aimed at enhancing, firstly, growth, and secondly, aimed at relieving our people of the very heavy burden that the pandemic has placed on us. I would have relished the opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to examine the full financial and economic picture of our Federation and to engage in a constructive and harmonious debate aimed at addressing the issues we face as a nation and fostering a united and cohesive approach to this monumental and multi-dimensional crisis that has engulfed us all. Mr. Speaker, it is a crisis that threatens to undermine the strong foundation built by the Labour administration that I led and previous governments before me as well. And it threatens to rob our people of the quality of life that they have enjoyed by building on that foundation. I came here yesterday expecting to hear an announcement that all IMF reports on our Federation are now available to the public, as is expected in all well-governed democracies. and to hear a constructive set of proposed solutions based on a factual and truthful assessment of the situation. In fact, a situation that is monumental in nature and that is very, very massive that we face. Instead, we are confronted with the same deception, the cover-ups, the distortions, and the political posturing that has characterized the annual budget presentations over the last 5 years. And so I must admit this morning, after reflecting yesterday and earlier today as well, it is a great disappointment for me, and it is a great threat to the Federation as a whole. Without careful and fact-finding and fact-based planning, the social and economic consequences of the pandemic could multiply and extend well into the long term for generations to come, to the detriment of our people here in St. Kitts and Nevis. It is, Mr. Speaker, impossible to arrive at a proper solution to any problem without doing the following. One, without a full and deep understanding of the problem. And two, without an honest and truthful and realistic assessment of the implications of the problem and of all issues surrounding the problem. Mr. Speaker, this year's revenue estimates clearly indicate the intention of the government to deceive the public in respect of the impact of the pandemic on our economy. There is evidence, Mr. Speaker, of gross overestimation of revenue throughout the entire book of estimates. For instance, if I were to refer you, Mr. Speaker, to volume 1, page 5, subsection 1. Of the 2021 estimates, it is estimated here that unincorporated business tax, if you look on the recurrent revenue, on the tax revenue, the heading unincorporated business tax, it is estimated, Mr. Speaker, that this will increase by some $419,962, or 6.23%, from $6,744,422 to $7,164,384. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that this estimate is perhaps the most glaring, the most blatant example of deception and overestimation. This revenue item relates mainly to small businesses that have been hardest hit, Mr. Speaker, by this pandemic. The small people, the hairdressers, those who are involved in cosmetology, those who are managing people's properties, those who are in restaurants, those who are on the beaches braiding hair. These are the small people who have been hardest hit, Mr. Speaker, by this particular pandemic. This sector in particular has been denied any form of relief from the government, Mr. Speaker. Yet the Minister of Finance, our Prime Minister and member for constituency number 7, is clearly at it again, misleading the country as to what really is the true picture. Because you see, Mr. Speaker, if in 2019, when there was no pandemic, and the actual was recorded as $6,364,163, how can this tax, this unincorporated tax, which is collected from small people, small businesses, how can this tax in 2021, next year, for which this budget is being presented, how can this tax be more than it was in 2019, when in 2021 it is the aftermath of the pandemic that has hit us? In fact, the next-gen Labour Party's proposal with regard to a fiscal stimulus package, we had identified this sector as a highly vulnerable sector to the impact of the COVID-19 crisis and had proposed direct assistance to small businesses. Team Unity offered no new resources to this sector, and it continues to deny our small businesses the support that they require in order to recover from this devastating impact of the pandemic crisis. And so it is shocking. It is quite shocking, therefore, that notwithstanding the brutal impact of the COVID-19 crisis on this segment of the economy, the small business sector, the government is now proposing to increase collections of revenue from small businesses by some 6.23%. How is that going to happen? And so we must bear in mind that the 2020 estimates were actually prepared before the start of the COVID-19 crisis. They are pre-COVID-19 estimates, so that the government is projecting that in 2021, unincorporated business will not only recover fully and reach their pre-COVID-19 levels of performance, but that they will also exceed such performance and generate increase in revenue or taxable income of some 6.23%. This is ridiculous. And that is why I said this is one of the most glaring examples of overestimation in this budget. And there are several, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this gross estimation of revenue is almost described as fraudulent and must not be unchallenged. And this must be the doing, Mr. Speaker, of the Prime Minister himself, who presented this budget yesterday. This gross overestimation of revenue is apparent in numerous and other revenue items throughout the budget. But the overestimation of income tax, which is a major revenue head, is particularly pronounced, Mr. Speaker, in this budget. It is estimated at page 5.1, again, Mr. Speaker, if you would bear with me, the same page, page 5.1 of volume 1 of the estimates. It is saying here, Mr. Speaker, that income tax collections for 2021 will fall short of the pre-COVID 2020 estimates by $7 million or 4.68%, Mr. Speaker. Again, another overestimation. But the 2021 assessments of income tax, I want to remind us, they are based on income generated in 2020, the very year that the economy has been hardest hit so far. The assessments of income tax, they are based on the income generated in 2020, this year. And we are all aware that the level of economic activity in 2020, Mr. Speaker, was seriously affected by the curfews, the lockdowns, the border closures, and other unfavorable but negative economic effects on the country by the coronavirus, Mr. Speaker. In fact, the IMF estimates that economic activity contracted in St. Kitts and Nevis by some 18.6%. 18.6% in 2020. So how come then the estimates for 2021 is mere $7 million or merely 4.68%, when the IMF said that already in 2020 there has been a massive decline in economic activity to the tune of 18.6% in 2020. Hence, Mr. Speaker, the government needs to explain how tax assessments based on income generated by economic activity in 2020 would fall by only 4.68%, Mr. Speaker, when the underlying income and related activity in 2020 is estimated to have fallen by a massive, a whopping, mammoth 18.6%, Mr. Speaker. But I want to go further, Mr. Speaker. I want to go further, Mr. Speaker. It must be noted, I'm emphasizing it, it must be noted, Mr. Speaker, that in view of the devastating impact of the pandemic on the cash position of companies, there is likely to be substantial increases in arrears of taxation, so that even monies due in 2020 may not even be collected until subsequent years to come after this present crisis. And so, Mr. Speaker, this is a budget of deception. It is a budget of gross overestimation. It is a budget of fraud, Mr. Speaker, and that is why I am calling it out today in this Parliament. Without a proper explanation for such anomalies, one has to conclude, Mr. Speaker, that the government is attempting to mislead our citizens. That is what is happening. Through deliberate misstatements of the budget numbers. And Mr. Speaker, this is very, very painful, because at this time in particular of crisis, we are expected to be frank and truthful, to get all on board to tackle this particular crisis. This is a very, very serious situation that this country finds itself in, like so many other countries around the world. And when, on receiving volume 1 of the estimates, and I read the introduction, especially that section that deals with the message of the Minister of Finance, I want us to be reminded that it said that the Prime Minister would have changed. It's very different, but it's very difficult, I would say. But also, I want to make it very clear that it had promised that there would be, and I want to read it for our benefit, for those who are listening. The message from the minister said very clearly at the introduction, just let me get to it. It says, the estimates are arranged in an activity-based and performance-based budget format, which is intended, Mr. Speaker, to create greater transparency and accountability to the citizens of this, our federation. This budget is not doing that. The minister has already gone back on his word. Mr. Speaker, alternatively, I believe that they may be considering increases in the tax rates or the deployment of more forceful and unconscionable methods of enforcement and collection to the detriment of our taxpayers, who are still reeling, Mr. Speaker, under the financial impact of the pandemic. Because if this is not so, how then can we arrive at these figures? How then can we arrive at these figures here this morning? But I ask that the Ministry of Finance, Prime Minister, his cabinet, I ask for compassion from you for our people. Because such approaches, I want to emphasize, would be grossly unjust and would be outrageous, Mr. Speaker, and would not yield the expected results because, as my old grandmother, Henny Margaret, they used to call her in St. Paul's, as she used to say to us, you cannot squeeze water out of stone. You can't, Mr. Speaker. The reality of the situation is that the economic crisis is severe. It is severe. If you're frank and open with people, they will understand. And that is why I'm saying there's no need to do what is being presented to us yesterday. Let the people know frankly what is the true picture. Let us come together as a people and work our way through this crisis together. Bringing figures that are unrealistic, Mr. Speaker, is not going to get us into the correct frame of mind to understand the severity of our crisis and thus the need for us to work together to go out of this and beyond. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that in general, the revenue estimates, they have failed us in several areas, Mr. Speaker. Failed to take full account of the likely impact of the pandemic on economic activity in our federation. It has failed us in not taking account of the fact that notwithstanding opening of our borders, the tourism sector continues to be in a state of devastation and could remain that way throughout the entire tourist season 2020 to 2021. Similarly, Mr. Speaker, it has failed to recognize that the offshore education sector is operating well below full capacity and could very well remain that way for a substantial part of next year. That is why we expect realistic figures and not overestimations, as I have alluded to a moment ago. Mr. Speaker, moreover, although the IMF is projecting growth for next year, I'm coming to what he was interjecting, it does not forecast that our level of economic growth will reach pre-COVID-19 levels during the course of 2021 or even 2022. And that is the point I wanted to make also, Mr. Speaker. Because you see, even if we achieve the growth rate for 2021 of 5%, that is what you said here in the budget, 5%, included in the assumptions listed at page 6 of volume 1 of the 2021 estimates. That's what it is. This would not entirely wipe out the economic contraction of 18.6% projected by the IMF for the year 2020. We would still fall short. I want to emphasize this, because I think you need to understand very clearly the statistics here. We would still fall short of the pre-COVID-19 level of economic activity by approximately 13.6%. Do the maths. 18.6 minus 5% is 13.6. Don't tell me no. In fact, let me move on. In other words, Mr. Speaker, of the reduction in GDP of 18.6% in 2020, we would only have recovered 5% in 2021, leaving a further 13.6%, Mr. Speaker, to be recovered in subsequent years. How many years? We don't know, before we reach the pre-COVID level of economic activity. That is a fact, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is therefore quite surprising, in fact, shockingly surprising, that so many revenue items are projected to fall short of the pre-COVID 2020 estimates by relatively small, unrealistic, small percentages. And I again give you a reference. For instance, if you again join me at volume 1, page 5, page 5.2. The taxes on international trade and transactions, which includes, among other things, import duty, customs service charge, travel tax, and value-added tax on imported goods, are expected to fall short of the pre-COVID estimated amount by $5.98 million, or 3%, Mr. Speaker. And this is extraordinary, extraordinarily misleading, Mr. Speaker, in view of the fact that the level of economic activity in the economy as a whole could fall short of the pre-COVID-19 levels, again, by the same 13.6% we just calculated a while ago. Mr. Speaker, the maths and the figures, they ain't matching up at all. The creative accounting is blatantly fraudulent and almost criminal, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, indeed, looking at revenue expenditure as a whole is only projected, Mr. Speaker, to fall short of the pre-COVID 2020 estimates by 10%. And the Housing and Social Development Levy, which is a levy on the salaries and the wages earned by our people, is projected to fall short of the pre-COVID level by 10%. Mr. Speaker, this is particularly anomalous. You know why? Because so many of our people are still out of work and depend on assistance from Social Security, which is not subject to any housing and social development levy at all. So again, what kind of creative accounting is this? This is grossly wrong and misleading. Mr. Speaker, again, I quote the Minister of Finance in the introduction on the minister's statement. He said that he intended to create greater transparency and accountability to the citizens of this federation. And again, Mr. Speaker, this promise has fallen hollow because it is not done at all as is being promised in the commitment made by the minister under the statement of the minister in the introduction of our estimates. Mr. Speaker, the 2020 general elections are behind us, and the magnitude of the crisis that we face is such that we must all put politics behind us and earnestly work together to bring economic activity back to pre-COVID levels. I am committed to do that, Mr. Speaker. We must target levels of economic growth that would allow our people to advance their standard of living and resume the very many personal plans that they have had to put on hold because of the coronavirus global pandemic. This must be our cherished goal. My biggest problem, Mr. Speaker, with this budget is that it continues to promote divisiveness among our people. It is not a call to action. It does not foster the unity and togetherness that are required to overcome the crisis and move to a path of sustainable economic growth. It is the same old pattern of obscurity, of lies, of deception, of tribalism, and unmerited boastfulness, hollow, narcissistic, boastful behavior of a leader who is rallying the citizens into action and to naturally return our country to viable economic activity. And so I call on social society, I call on the media, our fourth estate, to speak up and to demand more of their representatives, to demand greater transparency, to demand truth, and to demand more opportunities for constructive debate and dialogue on matters of national interest and in the best interest, Mr. Speaker, of our dearly beloved country. In this time of crisis, when our government seems drunk and addicted to political posturing and tribalism, our country really needs to hear a clear, articulate, and objective voice more than ever before. The cost of silence in the current circumstances in which we find ourselves is likely to be quite gigantic and could set back our social and economic progress by decades. And so, Mr. Speaker, the estimate of expenditure for 2021 makes it even starkly clear or clearer that this budget does not seriously attempt to address the social and economic problems that have arisen as a result of the global pandemic that has engulfed us. For instance, Mr. Speaker, in a period when so many of our people, Mr. Speaker, face such intense hardships, the allocation to public assistance, as shown, and again, Estimates Volume 2, page 5-4, Mr. Speaker, it shows, for instance, that public assistance has increased only moderately and is still below the actual expenditure in respect of the 2019 estimates by some $1.3 million or 3.6%. And I make the point, therefore, that if in a year of one of the worst crises that we have ever faced, in many, many decades, our allocation to public assistance is actually low. That is what is so ridiculous. In this year, when we have been hit by a serious global crisis, the amount that has been allocated for public assistance, Mr. Speaker, is actually lower than the actual expenditure 2 years previously. Actually lower, Mr. Speaker. Yet we are saying together that this is the worst crisis and our people need real assistance. And this is why I said, Mr. Speaker, that the naked truth, which cannot be hidden, is given right here in the Prime Minister's own words yesterday. What we are allocating for public assistance during the worst of times, Mr. Speaker, is less than what was given 2 years ago. That is why I said this is unrealistic, Mr. Speaker. It is an exercise that is quite stunning. It is a stunning anomaly, Mr. Speaker, which has reinforced my view that the government is not serious about the budget exercise and about economic planning here in this country. It is an exercise in creative accounting, simply to bamboozle, Mr. Speaker, the people's minds. But there are some people who need the assistance, and this does not give them any hope whatsoever. In the Prime Minister's own words, what is being allocated for 2020 is in fact less, Mr. Speaker, than what was even given 2 years ago, Mr. Speaker. What is it about, I wonder? I have to ask because I think you're just taking up my time. But I will bow to the Speaker.
You are misrepresenting what I said.
Misrepresenting what?
Mr. Speaker, even listen to your presentation. You said the allocation increased by $1.3 million. For your information and reminder, the comparison in the budget is not with respect to 2019. The comparison that you must make, but because budgets are annual, they deal with projection 1 year hence. If you want to make a proper comparison, you make between 2020 and 2021, because that is a journey on which we are embarked. The second point of misinformation in which you are engaged, the government's social safety net is spread across a range of ministries. Social development, education, health, all of them have social programs. You are looking at one specific ministry, perhaps social development ministry, and that has increased. You have to go and pay around the cross-section of ministries that are providing social support, not just the one ministry. So you are misleading yourself by the notes that were given to you this morning.
Mr. Speaker, I continue. This is an exercise in trying, of course, to interrupt, but I will move on. Mr. Speaker, I want to say further, Mr. Speaker, in a period when nations all over the world are seeking to bring relief to their citizens and to blunt the impact of the pandemic through one, fiscal expansion, and two, the deployment of various fiscal stimulus programs. The 2021 estimates before us show no evidence whatsoever of the implementation of a fiscal stimulus program here in St. Kitts and Nevis. Mr. Speaker, indeed, it clearly indicates that the bragging and boasting of the government about a fiscal stimulus program of hundreds of millions of dollars are mere empty words. Empty words that are intended, I believe, to deceive our people and gain political mileage. Mr. Speaker, the budget shows that total recurrent expenditure in 2021 is projected to increase by a mere $21 million, or 3.4% over the 2020 budget, while the capital budget is projected to increase by just over 0.5%. 0.5%. Not even a whole percent. 0.5%. 0.5%, Mr. Speaker. And so the question must be asked, where is the fiscal stimulus of the hundreds of millions of dollars that the government has been boasting about? The increase is moderate, even for a normal year in which there is no crisis, Mr. Speaker. Moderate for a normal year in which there's no crisis. And this requires, Mr. Speaker, an explanation. Where is the hundreds of millions of dollars? Where gone? Where they gone? And the naked truth, Mr. Speaker, is that it appears as if no money, no day. That is what it looks like to me. That is what it looks like to me, Mr. Speaker. The increase is merely moderate, even for a normal year, much less a year of crisis. And this, again, I say, requires some explanation. If the government feels that fiscal expansion is not the appropriate response to this crisis that we are facing, if that is how you feel, then it should say so. It should say so. And it should not only just say so, it must give reasons. And it must give good reasons as well. But it is, you see, dishonesty. And it is wrong to give our people the impression that the government is implementing a massive fiscal stimulus program, hundreds of millions of dollars, and then come to Parliament with a budget that proposes a mere increase of half of a cent, half of 1%. Not even a whole percent, half of 1%, Mr. Speaker. No, you wait. And this, Mr. Speaker, is really, in the capital expenditure, it is a very moderate increase of 3.4% in the recurrent expenditure, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, no wonder Blanchard is out there singing in the tents, rats in the cabinet, big rats in the cabinet, because I smell a big rat in the cabinet. Need some cheese. Well, maybe I don't have any cheese. Mr. Speaker, of course the government would argue, as we are hearing, that it provides relief to affected workers through Social Security, same thing. But this represents, Mr. Speaker, only a fraction of the fiscal stimulus that has been announced by the government, and the use of the funds of Social Security in this way raises a number of questions which I want to ask today, Mr. Speaker. Firstly, the resources of the Social Security do not belong to the government. The resources belong to our people, not the government. Money are deducted from our salaries and wages monthly, and it must be available to us when we are sick, Mr. Speaker. When our young women are pregnant and get their babies, they must get their maternity benefit, Mr. Speaker. Every single benefit that they're entitled to, they must get, Mr. Speaker. And I don't believe it is right for the government to dip its hands in our money, the people's money. It is wrong. It has no authority so to do, Mr. Speaker. And that is why, even though some people have received some money from the Social Security, that is not the government money. They need to know that. It is their own money. And they have saved the money there in Social Security for their own use. When the time comes, the government should be looking after this crisis in a different way, not using our Social Security funds. And that is why I say, Mr. Speaker, this act of this government raises a lot of concerns throughout our country. That is why the law governing Social Security, the laws, they are very clear, Mr. Speaker. Clear in relation to what the resources of Social Security can be used for. The law is clear. It does not permit the government, it does not permit the government to dip into the resources of Social Security as and when it likes. Can't be so, Mr. Speaker. It is wrong by law, and it should not be done. And so the people need to know this hundreds of millions of stimulus that you've been hearing, where the money is. If the money was there, then you don't have to dip your hands in Social Security. Not at all. Social Security belongs to us, the people. We save our money there. And there is where we should go and get it when we want it, not when the government appears to be broke and going to use it for all kinds of things. That is what I am speaking out about, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker, because the member
point of order again.
Is in fact...
You spoke to a whole 3 hours yesterday, nobody disturbed you.
But you're making an untruth, you're saying we're breaking the law. It needs to be corrected, because we have illegal opinion.
Honourable Member for number 7, I do not like to preempt what a point of order will be about, but it appears to me that the member for number 6 is pretty much just given an opinion, a criticism, but I will hear it, but
I think this is fundamental.
let's
The
hear it.
fundamental point, Mr. Speaker, because a member cannot infer that a law is being breached and it goes unchecked. Truth is the Social Security Board intervened in this matter, sought legal advice, and it was clear that the resources of funds which they were using had nothing to do with the funds that should be earmarked to meet the obligation of Social Security. Nothing to do with it.
Maybe I missed it, but
the member then is telling an untruth. There is no.
I am not telling any untruth.
In relation
Honourable
to
member,
Social Security,
not meaning to.
it has to be corrected.
No, not meaning to curtail your point of order, but
No, that's the point.
did he state that there was a law being breached?
Yes, that is
Well,
the sense of what he's saying.
I would admit
We are
that
taking
I
our
missed
people
that
money
part.
as
I
that
missed that
become
part.
that pool.
Honourable member, for number 7, I admit I missed him saying
That is right.
there was some breach of some law.
Social Security have people
So-
have reserved.
You can complete your point of order if you're not.
No, the Social Security has different reserve sources set aside to meet its legal obligation. None of them is being touched in relation to its support to the stimulus package. None of them. Those funds are untouched and will be preserved forever.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I think that this is deliberate just to take me off track. But it can't work.
Let me intervene on that
It
point.
can't work.
Let me intervene on that point, Honourable Member for number
Yes.
6. Remember, we're having a debate.
I know.
I'm trying my best to be clear on what the points of order are. I admitted just now I missed your saying, I mean, you haven't refuted it, that you suggested there was some breach.
I said that I
law.
believe that the law does not allow for this. I said that, no, I don't agree with you, because I have legal advice as well.
Order.
You can't tell me it's wrong.
Order.
I have legal advice, you have legal advice.
Order. So on that note, if those were your words, the member was on a point of order to lend some clarification
Right.
to that.
Let's move on. Point has been made.
No, Honourable Member, don't rush me. Let's be clear.
No, I'm not rushing.
I'm trying to give guidance as to why I allowed the point of order. I am satisfied now that the point of order was in order. Continue.
Right. So, as I was saying, Mr. Speaker, there has to be questions pertaining to the legality of the use of such resources to fund expenditure and carry out activities that should fall fairly and squarely on the shoulder of the government. Social Security is not the government. Such arbitrary use of the funds of the Social Security without any actuarial evaluation also, Mr. Speaker, represent a major risk to all pensioners and contributors who are legally entitled to look to Social Security for assistance during periods of illness or periods of old age. Mr. Speaker, that is what the situation is. Promising people hundreds of millions of dollars of stimulus in a package, and it is empty. You have to go over there and take some money from Social Security to fulfill your own promise. You can't promise people that if you know you don't have the money. Don't do that. It's misleading people. And that is what I'm saying. It's not your money. It's not the government's money. You can't say the money is there. It is the people's money. I'm glad you know that. Not the government's money. You see. And so, Mr. Speaker, that is why I say there must be a question concerning the legality of the use of such resources to fund expenditure and carry out activities that should fall fairly and squarely on the shoulders of the government. You don't have to lean on the Social Security for that. You say you have a whole heap, a surplus. Use your surplus. That's what you say you have. Use it. And so I make the point further that such arbitrary use of the funds of the Social Security without any actuarial evaluation, it represents a major risk to all our pensioners and contributors who are legally entitled to look to the Social Security for assistance when they need it. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, it is very, very important that the Parliament gets a full and comprehensive understanding of all issues related to the national development. The activities of Social Security and other public corporations in respect of programs that should fall within the responsibility of the central government should be reported on during the budget presentation so that Parliament could get a comprehensive understanding of the state of the economy before we are called upon to vote on the allocation of public funds. That is all I want to emphasize as well. The state corporations, whether they are a private company or they are headed by a board appointed by the minister, they are still, Mr. Speaker, under the purview of the government. And so we should be able to get updated information and picture of what is the situation in those corporations when we are deliberating here at budget time. And so I emphasize the public corporations should not be used as a tool to conceal and obscure questionable activities and programs of the government. It should not be so. And all I am saying is giving this House the benefit of my own experience. I have seen it when it was being done. We brought it under control, and it looks as if it is out of control again. So I'm not knocking anybody. I'm just simply saying that from my experience, I'd like to share this. This is important. We are parliamentarians. We are asked to vote on a budget. We are talking about the central government. But what about the state corporations and public and the private companies which are owned directly by the government? We need to know what's happening in them as well. That is all I am saying. And I say further that if public corporations have gone bankrupt to the point where the central government has to pay its employees, that's a matter to be discussed at budget time. It has to be discussed at budget time because it can influence maybe how we vote in the Parliament when the bill is finally presented for voting. That's all I'm saying. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, what happens to people who are not registered with Social Security but find themselves out of work or in financial distress because of the pandemic? Many of our people have no income whatsoever. There are taxi operators out there use their little funds they had within their family for development, send all their children to universities, did not really realize that in not paying the self-employed savings into the fund, that they eventually will find themselves in this water. But not only that, Mr. Speaker, some of them who are employed, their employers take their money out of their wages. Take the money out of their wages, but don't pay it into Social Security. And some of those same people out there now are suffering as a result of this pandemic. They are to be assisted. We have to find a way of assisting them. Mr. Speaker, this is what is happening right now. These are real-life examples. The man is getting nothing when in fact he was working and people taking out his money every week. No money is being paid into the fund, and so no money there for him. Those things can't be right. All I am saying, we need to find a way of addressing these issues. Because in many instances, the contributions are deducted. They're not handed over to Social Security. And there is a major problem with hundreds of people out there. Under these circumstances, the government must find a way through public assistance or some other means to help these people who have fallen through the cracks. Some of them of their own making, but some of them not of their own making at all. Unfortunately, no provision was made in the public assistance program for them, or in any expenditure item that, as far as I know, in the budget to address this problem. If it is there, let me know. And to bring relief to the affected persons, Mr. Speaker. Fourthly, why is it necessary for the government to use the resources of Social Security to carry out duties that obviously fall within the ambit of the government's responsibility? It seems that the government is short of funds, Mr. Speaker. That is how it looks like to me. In fact, paragraph 90 of the budget address, I want us to go to the budget address, paragraph 90 of the budget address. Page 45, middle of page 45. If you look there, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance, in my opinion, has expressed to us that the government is short of funds. He has indicated, and I want to quote him here, it is likely that the pandemic would require the government to borrow. But if you ain't short of funds, you don't borrow. You borrow in order for us to achieve our development objectives for 2021 and the medium term, end of quote. This is surprising because when this government assumed office in 2015, they inherited a bank balance of some $900 million, Mr. Speaker. Write it down. $900 million, you could say $1 billion. And they have boasted, Mr. Speaker, of huge surpluses in virtually every year since they assumed office. They also inherited, Mr. Speaker, a thriving citizenship program. So how come we are hearing that he is going to go and borrow money? I thought they say it's only Douglas used to borrow money. I thought that is what they were saying. Only Douglas used to borrow money. Mr. Speaker, I want to make it absolutely clear that it seems as though the government of St. Kitts and Nevis is broke. went and dipped its hands into Social Security, and now he is announcing, I'm going to have to go and borrow money in order to achieve our development objectives for 2021 and the medium term in the future. Oh, it looks like that. This is surprising, Mr. Speaker, because, again, they received from my government almost $1 billion. So the question, what debt you talking about? 73% GDP debt, that is what you got. You understand, Mr. Speaker? $1 billion. And in 5 years, it looked like they'll walk it off. Mr. Speaker, the debt I left was taken care of there. Mr. Speaker, this is surprising because when they assumed office in 2015, they inherited a bank account, Mr. Speaker, of $900 million, nearly $1 billion was in our bank account there in this country. Mr. Speaker, and after, I always said it, I have always said it, oh, more than once in here. No, sir, not 600 million. Anyway, you are a distractor. Move on. They also, Mr. Speaker, inherited a thriving citizenship program that has continued to be a major earner of revenue for the government. For instance, if you were again looking at page 5 of the estimates volume 2, Mr. Speaker, please look at that for me. You will see that, volume 1, sorry, you will see that in 2019 alone, Mr. Speaker, the citizenship program generated some $442.6 million. The government must give an account of this money. Up to now, we don't know how this money has been spent. There's no figure that has been given to us, an explanation with how it has been spent. Mr. Speaker, in 2019, $442.6 million. 5.6, volume 1 of the estimate. The government must give an account of this money. And we would like to know where the money gone. 2019, $42.6 million. 2021, have to be borrowing money, increasing our debt. That is the real picture. That is the picture that is painted here. His own words. 2019, $442.6 million from the citizenship program. 2021, we are now hearing that they are borrowing money in order to be able to meet their commitments and thus increasing our national debt. The government must give an account of this money. That is what I want to emphasize. We would like to know where the money gone. Where the money there? As they would ask on the streets, where the money there? People want to know where the money gone. And as parliamentarians that represent the people of this country, we have the right to know. Our people also have the right to ask questions and to have answers which are full and truthful whenever they are given. After all, Mr. Speaker, having to borrow money in 2021, when in 2019, the CIP which we left was thriving, bringing in revenue of $442.6 million. Left in the treasury in 2015, $900 million. Where the money gone? 5 years and it's gone. Mr. Speaker, that is what we are asking. That is what the people want to know. The shortage of funds of the government is particularly troublesome, Mr. Speaker, because of the lack of transparency. The bank balance of the government is a carefully guarded secret, and the IMF has been denied permission to publish its findings in respect of the St. Kitts Nevis economy. No accounts have been published for the SIDF in respect of what they have in recent years. How much was in the fund in 2015 when we left office? Was it 1 billion? Was it 1.5 billion? Was it another 900 million? How much was it? Mr. Speaker, I want to make the point further, Mr. Speaker, that there was a hurricane relief fund launched in 2017. This was part of the citizenship program. No accounts, Mr. Speaker, were ever produced in this fund or for this fund. I am a member of parliament. I need to know how much money was made from the hurricane relief fund. People out there still can't get their roofs repaired from the money which the government collected to do exactly that for the citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis. So where's the money? Hurricane Relief Fund. I understand it's close to $1 billion was collected. Nobody seemed to know. No figures being given. The people have a right to know. And that is what I'm saying. If in the middle of a more serious crisis and things are like this, and there was money that was left there, people should not be having these hardships with so much money around. So I ask again, what happened to the money? Where the money gone? Because clearly the money not there, clearly. And so, Mr. Speaker, the questions will continue to be raised because they are very important questions if we are to sit down and work with each other and understand how we are going to overcome this crisis that has engulfed us. Mr. Speaker, the Sustainable Growth Fund, it is now operational. We understand that the SIDF has been closed. On its closure, what was in the fund? Was there any money in the fund? Why is it the government had to go and dip its hand into Social Security when, in fact, we had the SIDF there? Mr. Speaker, the Sustainable Growth Fund, it is now operational. And again, there is no accountability, no transparency, no published audited accounts. And this causes me to ask myself, where is civil society? Where the money gone? Mr. Speaker, I want to make the point further that the Prime Minister yesterday made reference to our achievements in fighting crime. And I believe that we must say that it is good that there has been a reduction in serious crimes. Over the last 2 years, we're hearing to the tune of about 22%. This is a situation which I believe we need to better understand as to the reasons why we have found ourselves in this place. We want to make it clear that it is a well-established principle that if people are open, if there is appropriate accountability and transparency, we are almost certain that our democracy will be sustained. And so I bring at this time, within the context of the budget, the Pay for Peace initiative, which was referenced on page 35 and page 36 of the budget that was presented by the Prime Minister yesterday, specifically in paragraph 67 and 69. And let's turn to that. In fact, if you look under the heading on page 33, it comes under public safety and security. Mr. Speaker, it speaks of the pride with which the government, and I guess people think it's the Nevis, have in knowing that there has been a decrease in violent crimes. And according to the Prime Minister, the Peace Initiative, what has been dubbed the Pay for Peace Initiative, it would appear has been responsible for this decrease in crime. I want to thank all those who have been engaged in this activity. But there is something, Mr. Speaker, that causes me to raise the matter because there is need for greater understanding of how this initiative was financed. And I say it with the humblest of honesty that I personally would like to know. Because this seems to be a piece, Mr. Speaker, that passes all understanding. That is what it looks like to me. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to ask a few questions. Because you see, when you look, Mr. Speaker, at what was said, I think in the 2020 budget, well, the estimates, I realize, Mr. Speaker, that some notes, I want to make it clear, Mr. Speaker, that last year the Prime Minister said this initiative, that he was going to spend $12 million on this initiative. And he said all will be spent on this initiative for the year 2020. This same Pay for Peace initiative was at that time,
It's in a point of
Sorry?
order. The member cannot deliberately do that mischief. There's no
what
pepper
mischief is
peas.
that now?
The program has a name and you refer to the paragraph. Those
Mr.
kind of
Speaker.
mischief, Mr. Speaker, not going to
Mr.
work.
Speaker,
There's no pepper
I
peas.
said which
That's
is
referring
commonly
to a
called
different program.
Pepper Peace Initiative. I said it, it is the Pepper Peace.
There's no pepper.
It is common, that is what you have, you wrote it, yes.
No,
You
I
said
have
it.
no pepper peas.
You
Order,
said Peace
order.
Initiative. You said
It's a
Peace Initiative.
Honorable-
Right.
That's different to
But
what
I
you're
said the people out
categorizing.
there understand it to be the
Order,
Pepper Peace
order.
Initiative.
deliberate.
So what is wrong with
Honourable
that?
members,
I'm talking to the
order.
people out there as well.
May,
No, I'm not being deliberate. We must know what I'm speaking about.
Order. May we have is there a specific name given to the program?
It is
Documented?
It is called Peace Initiative. But we call it outside. The ordinary man call it Pepper Peace Initiative. So what is wrong with that? Everybody know what I mean, what they're talking about? He knows too. It is not a separate program. It is your Peace Initiative. But I say people call it Pepper Peace. That is all. Oh, I don't understand why he's so tipsy. Yeah? Why you so edgy? Is you sound tipsy? I don't know what is wrong with you. Cool out. Sit down. Cool out. It's 3 hours you had yesterday. Let me have the time. For God's sake. Let me have my time. But anyway, I was saying, Mr. Speaker, when you look at the program, it was $12 million last year. He said last year it is going to be a program. We will use up all of the money. It's $12 million. Lo and behold, you come to the estimates this year, this time in the capital, volume 2, Mr. Speaker. Come to the estimates. And what do you see here? The Peace Initiative. $31 million. This is a capital project just to be used this year. It was, at that time, a capital project in the Ministry of National Security. This year, for next year, it is being presented to us as a new program. $31 million. $31 million, Mr. Speaker. Not 3.1 million. $31 million. After using $12 million this year. That is the point I want to make. And when you look at it under the office of the Prime Minister this year, it has the same code as it had last year for this year. Well, what is this? Is there something to hide? Is it an error? Is it that something went wrong with the computers and they typed wrong figures inside here? What is it? You had a program. You came to the parliament. You said, December last year, I have a program. It's a peace initiative. I'm going to have to spend $12 million on this program. The parliament said, go ahead, spend it. Before the year is done, we come back to parliament now for next year and say, I want to have another $31 million approved for the same program that should have ended this year. That is the point I want to make. And that is why these raise questions. You know why? Because there are a lot of questions out there pertaining to how this program is functioning. Because you know what they're saying out there? The money moves from the Ministry of Finance and it goes to the Development Bank.
There's a point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Who is there in charge of the Development Bank?
Number 6, point of order. Mr. Speaker, the peace initiative indeed
is noted on the Capital Projects Office of the Prime Minister. And if you look in volume 2 of the draft estimates, you will note such on page 20. It's on the 05, page 20. 05, page 20.
Yes, right. That's the page I have.
And it refers to the estimated total cost of the peace initiative at $31 million. However, it also speaks to the estimated expenditure in respect of 2021. And it says from revenue, $2 million. From loans, $8 million. And so you have a total, Mr. Speaker, of $10 million being the expected expenditure in respect of the peace initiative for the year 2021. Mr. Speaker, like most capital projects, you have them capitalized over a number of years. And each year, you spend a particular amount. The member for number 6, who is a former Minister of Finance and Minister of National Security, Mr. Speaker, should clearly understand that. So that while $12 million was the amount in respect of this year, 2020, it's actually less which is expected to be spent in respect of 2021, an amount of $10 million.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, you were in government. I'm sure you were in government. And you know that that explanation can't hold any water anywhere. Can't. Because last year, as I said, this parliament sat. The Prime Minister brought a project. He says, a capital project. He says, listen, fellas, support me. I want to help out the boys. It's going to cost $12 million. That's what he said. It's going to cost $12 million. I will use up all $12 million. It's a capital project. It is for 2020. There was nothing about 2021 going on. Nothing was there about that. So, Mr. Speaker, but I am not fighting it down, you know. I am asking some questions, so let me finish. And no, I am not finished. He ain't answer me. How could he answer and I'm not finished? Mr. Speaker, he now comes this year, 2020, for 2021. What does he say? He said, I want this same project which should have ended. It is now in a different ministry. If it was in the same ministry, you don't even know that. I bet you didn't see that. I bet you didn't see that. You see, you two were fooled. You two were fooled. This is not in the same ministry.
Mr. Speaker.
The last time, Mr. Speaker, it was in the Ministry of National Security. Let me finish, man. It was in the Ministry of National Security. It is now in the Ministry of the Office of the Prime Minister.
It doesn't matter.
It is a $31 million project, capital project. This year alone, they said that they are going to use $10 million. $8 million they will borrow, and $2 million going to come from revenue. Mr. Speaker, I am saying that this is a project which should have been $12 million only. That's what he said. It is what he said.
Mr. Speaker.
He came here last year and said it will only be $12 million. Now, all of a sudden, we have been asking this parliament to approve another $31 million for the Pepper Peace initiative. Come on, man. Come on. We need explanations here.
Mr. Speaker.
There's a point of order.
Well, say that.
I thought that the...
You must say that. If you continue, fine. Say that.
Order, honorable members, there's a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, I really don't think I should take up my time like this, you know. I mean, it is unfair. They have their time to speak.
Honorable member, there's a point of order.
They have their time to speak. Why are they doing this, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker.
Why are you doing what you're doing?
Why are they doing this?
Why are you doing what you're doing? I am recognizing a point of order. Member for number 7, are you?
Mr. Mr. Speaker, the member for number 5 and Deputy Prime Minister try his very best to assist the ex-Minister of Finance and ex-Prime Minister, member for number 6, and former Minister of National Security, who really ought to know better and really ought to show a better understanding of his reading of the estimates. This is clearly not a matter of peace, and all understanding, because the estimates say clearly, in relation to the peace initiative, estimated expenditure for 2021, revenue 2 million, loans 8 million, for a total of $10 million. $10 million. Less than last year, because from his own words, less than the 2020 allocation, because the program has been a success and we are managing it, we are better utilizing the resources. But the second point, Mr. Speaker, there is nothing novel with respect to this way of reflecting information in the budget. Take any other item under that, and you go beyond the mischief with the member for number 6 is engaging in. Hurricane relief project, for example, an estimated cost 68 million. The estimated total in 2019 was basically $17 million. So that is the nature of capital project, enduring. Each year you draw down a particular amount. 10 million. 10 million is the amount here of which we have projected for 2021. The 31 million has no relevance in relation to 2021.
Thank you,
and the member ought to know better and stop mislead the public
Mr.
in relation
Speaker,
to that.
I am reading what was presented in this parliament over Parliament.
No.
He presented that he has a capital project. Don't tell me no, you should sit down. Because you're finished, he's finished with you.
$10 million.
The speaker is finished with you, sit down.
$10 million.
Continue, honorable member for number 6.
Right. Mr. Speaker, I am sure, as I said, you understand this. You were in government. And you've been around these debates even since you're out of government. Last year, the Prime Minister came under the hat of National Security Minister, and he says, I want you to approve $12 million to be spent in 2020 on the Pepper Peace Initiative. We said, yes, go ahead. He said, I will spend all. This is the extent of the project. I will spend all. And so we went along with it. This year now, anticipating the budget for next year, he now comes under a different head, this time the office of the Prime Minister, and he's saying that we must give him $31 million to a project. I will draw down, Mr. Speaker, I will draw down, he's saying, $10 million this year.
Order.
Intervention.
Mr. Speaker.
Interventions.
Order.
He is persisting on that, and each time they will have to...
I am saying nothing wrong. You don't want me to say it. That's your problem.
Order.
It's projected.
Honorable members, order.
10 million.
Order.
Not 12, not 31.
With respect to what you have stated.
Do you have this?
Okay, guide me through it, and I would...
Because I think it is page, Mr. Speaker.
Volume 2.
Volume 2, page 520. And you look at the line item yourself. 0605-245, Peace Initiative. Estimated total cost, $31 million.
Number 6, let's take it one step at a time.
520.
520.
Yes.
Yes, line item.
Line item 0605 to 45. Why is this echoing? 0605 to 45.
Peace initiative. Okay.
Peace Initiative. Look at that. Estimated total cost, $31 million. He says that estimated expenditure for 2021, he's going to take $8 million from a loan, and he will take the other $2 million from revenue. But I am saying, Mr. Speaker, last year we approved for this year $12 million. So if you were to give a true picture of this project so far, he has estimated it to cost $31 million in going forward, only wanting $10 million, he said, for 2021.
Mr. Speaker.
But you never let me finish, that's what I'm saying. You never allowed me to finish.
You're mixing up.
Just interrupting me all the time.
Take down here then. What these?
You understand?
Look all of these.
I am saying, Mr. Speaker, that this peace initiative, therefore, is going to cost us so far, according to what is being projected here, $31 million and $12 million, because $12 million was used up already this year. So it seems as though, let me make this statement, they never anticipated that this, in fact, they never intended for this to go on. It was to be used during this year, which is an election year. Listen to me, please. I can give my own explanation. He will have his time to respond if he wants to. They did not anticipate this program to go beyond the election year program. It was for elections. But they now have a problem because the young men have become restless about closing down the program after using them in the elections. And so he's now coming, asking the parliament, give me please for 2021, before anything happens, give me $10 more million. That is what is happening here. And our people need to know. But I am not really knocking it, you know. All I am asking, listen to me. All I am asking, questions. Because you see, $12 million spent this year during an election is a lot of money. How do we know that the young men get all of the money that they say was voted for them? Have they gotten all of the money? How are they paid? Who are the paymasters? They're giving them money in envelopes. Do they sign anything? How much money stays back after it is dished out from wherever it is dished out? This is what I want this parliament to answer for us. Because people out there want to know. It's a lot of money, Mr. Speaker. It is not a little bit of money. You know how much hardship people have out there? And how do we know the fellows really got that money? $12 million this year for the election alone, and another $10 million for next year. $22 million. Are they really getting the money? That is the question I want to ask. Because up to now, nobody could understand the structure of this program. Who are doing the accounting for them? Have the men really gotten $12 million in their hands? Why the money has to pass from the Ministry of Finance, go to the Development Bank? If you hear what is written here in the budget, it says, no, don't worry, that will be done. It says, through this initiative, I'm quoting the Prime Minister, our young men have been, one, provided assistance to start their own entrepreneurial ventures. What are these ventures? Have the young men really gotten this money to start ventures? Or have been directed to employment opportunities? Exactly which employment opportunities have been provided these young men? Mr. Speaker, I am here. Last year we came, we said we will give them 12 million. No accountability up to now to this parliament. None. No accountability. I want to know if the young men really getting the money in their hands. That's what I want to know.
But the director of audit answered you.
I want to
You have
know.
the report.
And then before I can get any answer, you're asking me today to approve another $12 million? Well, where is the accountability? Where is the transparency? That is what I'm asking.
That's why you know what it is.
That is why I'm asking. How is it spent? Why does it have to go over to the development bank? Who over there paying it? We understand that policemen giving them clothes and envelopes. Nobody signing anything. Come on, man.
Stop implicating police officers.
Who? I ain't implicating no police officer. Because you know who you have paying it off. Mr. Speaker, Nancy's story, you call him giving an account for $22 million. Nancy's story, you really serious?
$22 million. You're talking about a projection. And you have the audit report for
You said that you're spending all 12 million this year. It's an election year. You're going to spend all. Now in this budget today, you're asking me to give you $10 more million? You're going to get 8 million as a loan from wherever and 2 million from revenue in this hard guava crop time? Come on, man. Let us be realistic here. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, I want to make sure that the money which this parliament is allocating today, or whenever the appropriation bill is passed, that the young men are really getting the money in their hands. Because we understand all kind of people dipping their hands in it, Mr. Speaker. So I want to move on. You see, I want to move on. How much more time I have, Mr. Speaker? Tell me, please.
You began at 10:15, so 12:15 will be 2 hours, and then another hour. It looks like an hour and a quarter more, from my count.
Mr. Speaker, how much?
1 hour, 15 minutes
Right,
more
going good,
roughly
going good, going
from my
good.
count, yeah. Yeah?
I had some other things to make reference to. Huh? Man, I started up here with a number of this. Mr. Speaker, let me now continue, because I think I've made the point, and I think the people out there understand what I'm trying to say to them. So, Mr. Speaker, I will say that when we are therefore talking about what happened to monies which were left there, monies which have...
Let's take a 5-minute suspension, please.
5 minutes?
Yes. This House stands suspended for 5 minutes.
My papers are here. Everything is here. Everything is here. Don't worry about the shop. Everything is all right.